All right, welcome to another edition of the Leadership Event Live podcast with your host, Ricardo D. Rice, and my co-host,
Simone Cherie.
All right, so we are back. I meant to look at the number and I forgot. I think this is season 7.
Oh my God.
Maybe
Yes.
8. It may be 8. I think it might be 8. I meant to check and I forgot. In any event, these people are no strange. Well, there's been a swap out. So they're not strangers. They're just gonna swap out or swap in because last time it was Scott that was here. But you know these people, you know they're great personalities in a great organization. But I'm gonna let them introduce themselves again so that you will know because we have new titles and things. Well, not you, but wait, do you have new?
No.
Okay, so
She actually,
not Dana,
she
but
actually does.
I do.
She has
okay.
an
So
additional
we'll go
title.
over that first. So
Yeah.
take it away, you guys.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here again. My name is Dana Rickman. I'm the president and CEO of the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education.
And I'm Robert Gaines, Chief of Staff at the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education.
I just want to point out because here I can get him. Robert, how many positions have you had in 5 years? I love the upward mobility.
This is my 3rd. Yeah. Well, they've all been strategic.
I mean, they're great. I just love the show the progression. It's been like 3 positions. Every time I see him, it's like, well, I'm now this, and I'm now this.
Well, credit to Dana for,
Of just finding him more work
creating
to do.
space for
Like, why don't you
growth.
do and do this, and now do this, and we'll add that.
These are dream partnerships that you want to have in the workplace, that they look out for each other. Now that
Absolutely.
she's the boss, Madam President, I still
Yes.
get to say that, Madam President.
Yes.
So, we're back at it with the top 10 issues in education. So let's jump right into it. I will let you guys start.
Well, this is our 22nd?
Yes.
22nd edition of our top 10 issues to watch. We have not been doing this for 22 years, but the partnership has. And as you guys know, we try to really raise up issues in education and workforce development that are important to everybody across Georgia at the state level and the local level. And so we, pull together topics that we think about either going to have legislative consequences. The Georgia legislature is meeting now. If the state's implementing new programs and we also like to raise up some issues that we think are really important that nobody's talking about. And we try to, they seem to get more complicated every year. Education policy a decade ago used to be pretty straightforward. Educate the kids. But now it's wildly complicated, and so we do our best to take complicated issues and make them accessible to everybody to really whether you're a state education leader or just a parent trying to figure out what's going on, and that's who we publish this for. Yeah. And so this year we kind of grouped them into sort of different categories depending on what you want to do, but really thinking about how Georgia invests in its talent. Like, how are we developing the next generation of workers? How are we developing, our kids to be productive in the economy that's coming, that's rapidly changing with AI and, everything else. They always talk about getting people ready for jobs that don't exist, that we can't even.
So if you were going to give people like a broad overview, if they've never been familiar with the previous report, is that one of the what's some distinguishing things about this year? Or like, are you seeing more or less of anything? Is it mostly types of education, AI?
Yeah, and we're walking into, this is a particularly interesting time, I'll say, use the word interesting, especially in education, well, in everything. But for education and workforce development policy, that landscape since the Trump administration has wildly changed. And we're really uncertain what the federal government's going to do in terms of federal education policy. Right. And so we're under the impression that a lot of the decisions that are normally up to the feds, like different requirements, guardrails, things like that, are going to come down to the states to decide for themselves, like how to define IDEA, special ed, like all of these kinds of things we think is coming to the state, though it hasn't happened yet. And with a reduction in force at the federal level, what does that mean for state education policy? So those are open questions that we're in. What's Georgia's role in continuing a lot of that stuff that the federal government used to do, and what will that look like for us as a state? So those are open questions that we're dealing with. At the same time, you may have heard, I don't know, there's an election coming up in November.
Yes.
And not only is an election just generally, but in Georgia in particular, all of our constitutional statewide offices, except for state superintendent, they're going to be new people. Like we're going to have a new governor, a new lieutenant governor, a new attorney general, all of these things. And our state superintendent is running for another term, but he's got opposition in the primary. So we think usually an incumbent is elected, but there's a possibility we'll have a new state superintendent as well. And with everybody running for something else, what did we hear? Like a third of the Senate and a good portion of the House is running for something else. We'll have new leaders in the House and the Senate. So we're going to have a whole new crop of people coming in that don't have the history and the background, and then they may have new ideas, like who knows. And so it's a really interesting time where I've been saying it's probably too harsh, but the advantage of some scorched earth, is that you can build what you want and really think about it. And so for this issue and the work that we're doing this year in particular is really trying to put forth a really proactive vision of education and workforce policy. And instead of being like defensive, don't do this, don't do that, it's like, where do we need to be? And our first issue is called EdQuest Georgia, which is a 10-year plan that we've put together with our colleagues in our coalition that say, what do we need to do to be a top performing state and have 65% of our adult population by 2033 in the next 10 years, it was launched in 23, people have a credential of value that puts them in the workforce. Like, what does that pipeline look like? And so we've been putting forth policies and recommendations that will sort of incrementally get us there, because we're talking about big systems change that takes a minute. But we don't want to wake up in 2033 and say, oh, we forgot to do that. Like, you got to lay the groundwork. And so a lot of this is, like I said, investing in talent, optimizing local strategies, because there's a lot of good work happening in Georgia at the local level, but it was just happening in a silo. So how do we, bring it together and really align our priorities and, most importantly, our investments? Like, what are we investing in? Like, we talk a good game about we want X, Y, and Z, and we want these kinds of outcomes for our students and families, but are we aligning our budgets to support that? And so that's the real thrust of this issue and the work we're doing right now.
Okay, really helpful. I definitely want to talk about that because I don't think a lot of people understand how the federal decisions are going to impact a lot of the state decisions. Yeah. And I know we as you were just talking about, like a credential, I know that we talked about college quite a bit here. Yeah. And we'd also like to understand, like, how investments in college or lack of investments in college are also could potentially impact Georgia too. So, yeah.
I know there's so much swirling as an educator now. As an educator.
Yes.
There's so much swirling around.
From the front lines, you can tell us what we got right and what we got wrong and what we missed. We're always...
Did we push you in that direction, Ricardo?
I think secretly you did, and I don't know if I love or hate you for that, but I'm still deciding on that. But no, I think to Dana's point, like, for me, I didn't realize that education was so... Not diverse, but just so much. Like, I thought it was kind of, this is what we do, this is how we do it, and you just move. And to be in it's just like, wait, we made a decision last week, and now we're making this decision, but we didn't fully execute that decision. So now it's just kind of running into stuff, really, and especially for us, because we're at the bottom end. So it's just like, wait, you want us to do this, but we didn't do this, so how are they supposed to know this?
Yeah, the whiplash that educators must be feeling.
Hard pivots is what they call it.
And just like I've done to Robert over the years, here's more work, and you're whiplashing towards, I mean, it's just, I honestly don't know how teachers handle all of it and still be present in the classroom and not crazy, with their students, because I would lose my mind, balancing all of that, but then also being like a present, rational adult as you deal with children who are anything but, even on their best day.
Yeah, I mean, it's children and it's parents and it's administration. So it's like this circle you're constantly revolving into. You get one. It's like that water plug hole thing. It's like, I plug the parents, now I got administration. I plug administration, now I got the kids. It's like this never-ending cycle of stuff. But I will say it does distinguish the educators from the teachers, because there is a difference. Like, us educators, we're grounded. The objective is to teach the kids. So that when we do the I-ready stuff, we can see the growth, we can see the data, versus teachers who's just like, I don't want to do this every other day. Like, I don't want to be bothered with this. I'm not doing that. So it's a very delicate balancing act.
I like that, educator versus teacher.
Well, me and my friend, I have an educator friend. We're in the same grade, and we're always talking. I was like, there's a difference between an educator, because I'm older. So I was like, I think the people that taught us were educators. Like, we didn't see them sweat. They did what they needed to do. There was always a hunkering of what they were supposed to do. These teachers that come in now are just like, okay, well, I guess we going today. I guess we doing this. And it's just not like a consistency with it. So you can kind of tell it when you're in buildings. That
How much is it, you think, it's the structure that they're put into, though? Now with all of the requirements that, here are your lesson plans and your schedule and what you have to get done by the assessment and all this other kind of stuff. Is it in the training? Is it the type of person? Like, what do you think's driving that?
I think it's where you come from, because remember, I don't have an educator's background.
Yeah.
So mine is a mixture of the fast food that I've done, the running offices, the event managing. Surprisingly, it all plays into a part.
Leadership.
Or the leadership part, so
mentorship.
all comes into a part. Whereas people who've been actually groomed for this were groomed one way. That this is what the room should look like. This is what you do. And then they get into a classroom and it's like all these hard pivots.
Yeah.
And it's like, school didn't teach me this. So what am I supposed to do? Whereas me, it's like, oh, no, I can shift this. I've done this at some point in my life. So I can switch here to make us do what we got to do. So I think it's a little bit of that.
And all those jobs you talked about required a lot of like event planning.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's 100 fires every day. And all of these kinds of stuff. Like that you have to be flexible and nimble, and that's interesting.
And I think that's what I didn't plan on. I thought that coming into this, I was a substitute first.
Yeah.
And then they liked me, I liked them, and then they finally got me to switch over in 2023. And it was just like, I don't know how this is going to play out. And then it was like, I got in the class and I was like, wait, every skill that I've had, I need. Like, I didn't know I was going to need to be able to shift this fast through stuff. Or I didn't know I was going to be able to shut this off and move this to do it now. I didn't know I was going to need all these skills. But, yeah,
I got
what
a
they're
colleague
taught.
who's a principal. He has no real education background either, but his skill sets allowed him to really move his way up. And he's adaptable. He's agile. He learned the content. He learned how to be a teacher. But to your point, he came in with a different background, and it really accelerated his development. And I don't know if he has your vantage point, if he shares that perspective, but he has noted that playing football, being in different sectors, really allowed him to be a high-performing principal. And I think that's why some really savvy educators in higher positions seek folks outside of education. Some of these non-traditional pathways into the classroom can bring in talent where maybe you don't find it in the traditional ed prep setting. So,
well, we're already getting into it. Should we start with? Are we starting with teachers? Are we going in order?
We can start with teachers.
Is it 3?
Four.
Four.
We can jump in.
So before we started, I was asking our guests if we are in a teacher workforce crisis, like if we are in a talent crisis, or if we are in a true like crunching of the profession. And of course, I want to talk about investment. I think we're probably going to talk about investment if we talk about teachers. So what are we covering when it comes to just teachers in this year's report?
In this particular issue, we're really looking at recruitment and retention. Like, how do we recruit new teachers in, make it an attractive field, and people want to come in and be teachers, but also really focusing on retention. So it's the whole gamut. And so when you asked about workforce crisis, it depends on how you define it. So the answer is kind of yes-ish. We do have a shortage of teachers, but they're in the areas that there's not an overall shortage, but like, special ed, STEM, and then particular geographies, rural, things like that. So there are pockets where it's just impossible to get the quality teacher that you need. But then there's also a crisis in the sense of kind of what we talk about, like the teacher burnout. Like teachers just... God bless them. These are people, and the teachers, for all the studies have said, like they're not leaving the profession due to relatively low pay, because they kind of knew what they were getting into. Like they didn't expect going to teaching expecting to get rich. And teachers in Georgia are relatively they're on the norm. They're not better or worse than you can make family supporting career.
Okay.
And so it's not generally pay. It's all this other stuff that we were talking about, the support from administration, the respect from students, like there's the burnout and the constant, like they don't just work the 8 to 2 that they're in school. They get up before the sun and they're working late at night with little support, and the expectations, and then just I think a lot of the blame that they're getting for any problems that are happening in school. At the same time, we're making them not only responsible for teaching, but making sure the kid, gets mental health screenings, and they make sure their eyeglasses get checked, and if they're not feeling well, how do we get them to a doctor, and all of these community supports that are needed for families are being put in schools, which is a great place in terms of that's where the families are, in terms of like sort of a strategy to help serve families. Most of the families are connected to their local public school in some way or another. But what we've done sort of structurally is just told the school, hey, by the way, screen all of these kids.
Right.
And if there's a problem, just refer them to someone who may or may not exist. We've not given the schools training, resources, extra personnel to deal with all of this. So all of this is landing on the school, on the teachers. And so just so there's a crisis in terms of the profession and what it looks like, and the expectations on it. Yeah. And then there's also a crisis in terms of just the number of people willing to go into it and stay into it. And that's where, and the research has shown, like, if we could keep people in it, we wouldn't have the shortages that we're talking about. Like a lot of the shortages, I think the most recent numbers are it's like almost a half of teachers will go out within the first 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I look at my TikTok, and the teachers that are in TikTok are like, I'm leaving after 8 months.
Well,
like,
no, and so there's been several viral like influencers now. There's, I mean, teacher therapy. I've seen a lot of these growing channels from people who are former teachers or former educators, and they're just saying it's just impossible, that it's not practical, it's not fair. So how does that even work? Like I'm imagining class sizes of 30 kids, 35 kids. Yeah. Where's time for all of those things? Like I recall seeing my teacher for an hour at a time. At most.
There's just not. And that's why they work all the time, like into the night and early morning. Like that's when they're doing their prep and their follow-up and whatnot. And if they're lucky, they will get like some prep time during the day, like a pull-out. But do you get any prep time during the day?
I made it.
Yeah.
I made the prep time.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed. You have to figure it out.
You get it. It's like with lunch. Like lunch is supposed to be 30 minutes, but it's hard to leave. It's like, I can't go anywhere. And usually in the morning, I'm up trying to get ready for work. So I'm not making a sandwich to bring to work.
Yeah.
So I started using enrichment because the kids are gone for an hour. So my lunch and stuff is usually enrichment. Because unless they're with me, but they're typically not. So I use it for enrichment. Yeah. But I think it's a collective. Like when you think about like what you just asked, it's like, and I have to remind parents, your support at home is vital because, I have your kid 8 hours a day, but I'm not teaching them the same subject for those 8 hours. Yeah. They get like an hour for math, an hour for reading, or 45 minutes, and then you have to throw in intervention for the kids who are behind. Right. So now that's on us too. So it's like we do the 45 minutes with the whole class, which is 28 to 30 kids, and then you have to find time to do the intervention for the kids who are really behind. They're not tier 3, but we call them tier 1 and tier 2. And then you have to make all that happen over the course of a day. That's not including enrichment, lunch, recess, which are all things we typically have to do. So it's a balancing act. And what you typically find yourself doing is almost sacrificing the things that are not a school-focused thing.
Right.
Yeah. Because like my school is like a heavy math and reading school. It's not necessarily a heavy writing school. But I'm big on writing, so I have to maximize the time that I have and find other spaces because writing is the hardest thing for the kids.
Yeah, and this is the same across grade levels. Like it's not like something that like younger teachers who are who have like early age education are dealing with. High school's not. There's no difference for high school teachers where kids are a bit.
Not really. In terms, like in high school, you could be, we're like for younger kids, like you'll get the grade, so you have them for the whole day as they go in and out of different classrooms. But in like the high schools, you could be an English teacher who has 7 different English classes. Right. Ideally, you would have maybe 4 that are the same class that you're teaching, not different, but you'd have different preps if it's AP English, 9th grade English, 10th grade English, and then you would have one of those periods as a planning, whatever, but
what about the expectations around just like the child well-being or the supports and the services like that at high school age, middle school age? Same expectations across the board.
Issue, though, that when we talk about special ed and we talk about intervention, like she said, there's a shortage in those fields. Yeah. So then it falls to us, and I'm not really super qualified to do a tier 3 kid. Like this they need significant help. So you start getting IEPs and 504s, and it just becomes a whole.
What are some of these things mean for the ignorant?
Okay, well, I just learned this myself. So I just learned this myself. Okay, so an abridged version is an IEP is accommodations that a scholar needs. So they may need extra time to take a test.
Yeah, an individualized education plan.
Okay.
Something to that extent. Okay. So that's the long term. 504 is the short term. So they may break their leg and need accommodations for a couple of months. Okay. So in my head, because my sister's assistant principal, she has explained this stuff to me because I just kind of got thrown in.
Yeah, and the IEPs are where like if you think of like a traditional special ed or special needs child, that like long term, if they're either developmentally delayed or whatever, have some sort of learning differences, like they have their own like learning goals and what do we want to accomplish this year, and there's usually a team of teachers and a special ed teacher and the classroom teacher, and this is the learning plan for this child over the long term. Yeah, the 504s have a sort of lower bar of required. So I broke my leg, and so I can't. So I can't. And a lot of kids with like ADD or ADHD that need more time on a test or whatever, you can do those. You just think of like sort of easier accommodations for learning as opposed to a really strict learning plan. Okay. But all of that is just those are very helpful for the students, but it's a ton of paperwork as well. And so that's on top of what you have to do for your regular class, all the paperwork with that and coordinating. And so what we're doing right now in this particular issue is last year there was a the state Senate requested that the Professional Standards Commission, who certifies all the teachers, more or less, they went through and created a statewide strategic plan to support teacher recruitment and retention. And so we were part of that. Everybody was part of that, came together and really laid out like a 5 to 10 year strategic plan of how can we improve recruitment and retention, and some more immediate recommendations, long-term recommendations to really get at these problems that we're talking about, like supporting teachers going through the teacher prep pipeline to train them up, and then how do we retain. And so there's actually 2 particular bills going through right now that came out of that. One is House Bill 310, which would allow to pay stipends for student teaching. Ooh. This has been a huge problem in terms of getting people into the profession. And what Georgia's done over the past couple of years, which is good, is has transitioned to a student teaching model that's more like a medical residency model, where you student teach for like a whole year. And so you get a much more in-depth, instead of just that, one semester at the end of your 4 years of college, like, hey, what do you think? Okay, you're good to go. This is but for whatever reason, students don't get paid for that because it's considered, a class.
Externship.
Kind of thing. But what they're finding, and this is not surprising, is that students can't afford to work for free full time for a whole year.
Of course.
And so it's just like, it's not sustainable. And especially if you get out into the students who are in more of the rural areas, you have students that have to drive, an hour to get to the school, to then work all day and then drive an hour home. There's not time for even a part-time job to support them. And so it's financially we're actually losing potential teachers just in that process. And so can we pay them for that time? Another one, resolution that they're looking at is a study committee on veteran teacher pay. For those who don't know the way teachers in the state are paid, there's like a state table where you get step increases for years of experience. Mm-hmm. And right now it's capped out at 21 years. So if you work for 22, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you don't get a pay raise. Like it stops at 21. And so they're looking at studying, let's raise that bar to 25 years to keep teachers in longer if they so choose. So those are 2 things that are coming out of that, really looking at how do we support onboarding new bringing teachers in and then retaining teachers as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird.
Also, retired teachers.
There's
bringing back retired teachers so that
they're not lasting long either.
Say that again.
They're not lasting long either. Like we had a teacher that had 16 years of experience, didn't even make it through the first 2 months. 16 years.
Exciting. Everything we're talking about?
Yeah, just
this is why I retired in the first place?
Yeah, it was like, for me, I'm like, it was 16 years, so there should be nothing you've never encountered. And I guess
sometimes
it was.
Environment,
it was like, wow.
Combination of rust and new context, I can imagine it being a little overwhelming.
But I think it goes back to what we were saying. It's like the throw it on the teachers concept. Yeah. And that they continue to do that. It's like, I just found space for this. Now I have to do this too. Yeah. It becomes a lot, especially if you don't multitask. It's killer. Never thought waiting tables would come in so handy, being able to multitask.
Yeah. There's what we're talking about. If we want to get to like career pathways, like the durable skills and the skills that transition. That's where employers want now. That's what they want students coming out of school with, is like these durable, transferable skills of adaptability, creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, all of these kinds of things.
Can I ask one more question there, just to make sure I'm following too? So, knowing that we need or we don't have enough folks, especially, do people need to have a different educational pathway or different credentials if they want to focus on special education? Because I also remember people who I know had a relative or a loved one or just really cared about special education. But is that a different track that an aspiring teacher would be on?
It's a different certification that you would get to be a special ed teacher.
Okay.
But there are alternative pathways into teaching, as you know.
Okay.
And you could use the alternative pathway to get your special ed credential to be a special ed teacher.
Gotcha.
That's lovely. I'm looking at 5, issue 5, because attendance. It's something you don't think about until you're doing it. It's like in the old days, you could find time to catch that scholar up. Now you can't. You miss 2 days, but I don't have the time to go back to teach you. But it's not their fault.
Right.
So it's like,
can you share some like real world experiences, and then we can get into this too? So like, when you say like, without giving people's names.
What are you doing?
I just want to know, like, attendance, because this was definitely a challenge. Well, debatably a challenge for me as well at a certain point.
Okay, well,
what does that mean? Does that mean sickness? Does that mean just no idea?
I mean, it just means the fact that you're not in school. Like it's all
for any
it's all the above. It's the fact you're not in school. It just becomes more difficult, especially as you learn the parents.
Yeah.
So like I have kids now. When they start missing days, I'm going to our person that's in charge of communities. Like they're missing days. Mm-hmm. What's wrong?
What's going on?
And then you call and you find out the mom lost her job. Right. She's trying to rebuild life, so she's struggling to get them. And honestly, a lot of fathers are not present. So it's like, it's just me. I lost my job. We don't know where we're going to live. Then you get in a hotel living, and it's just like those are 2 times what a rent would be.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. But
are they usually these life crises, like these emergency situations,
more
versus
so than
like
not.
Just casual lateness?
More so than not, especially with the economy.
And that's the issue with this attendance thing is we used to think about attendance in terms of just, the kid is sick or the parents just aren't paying attention and how do we get them to school? But when you dig into it, it's so complicated. There's not like a silver bullet to fix, and it depends. And what we saw like during the pandemic, unsurprisingly, attendance or lack of attendance rates just skyrocketed. And it's come down a little bit, but we've had schools in areas where a quarter to a third of the class is out what we call chronically absent, more than 15 days of the school year.
Quarter to a third.
And so if you've got a quarter of your class not there, and why we put it there at that 15 days is that research has shown that if you miss more than that, like that's significantly less likely to even grade. Like it's tied to 9th grade math and high school graduation, 3rd grade reading. If you miss more than that, you're less likely to be reading on 3rd grade. Like that's significant. Wow. And so for the individual child, that's significant to miss that much. Wow. But if you're thinking about like the classroom, if you're a parent like, my kid's there every day, this doesn't affect me. But if a quarter of their class is gone, if you're thinking about how like that class will end the year behind because they just can't they can't move forward the way that they want. Yeah. And so the real crisis in attendance that we saw coming out of the pandemic has come down slightly. It's better than it was, but it's nowhere near the levels it was pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is if you look at it by grade, it's like a reverse bell curve where we see the biggest problems in like K to 3. And then the biggest problems in like 9 to 12. And they're more likely to attend basically in the tested grades, like, in the middle. And so the issues that would keep a 5, 6, 7-year-old out of school are probably significantly different than a high school student not showing up. Mm-hmm. And like the K to 3 kids, a lot of it is sickness. I mean, that's certainly kids get sick. I mean, my kid's home today. Probably her fifth.
You sound delighted with that.
Yeah, it's probably her 15th day. But then my other kid, who's the same age, has perfect attendance. Like it's just random. But then there's a lot of stuff with the little kids. It's usually to do with the family situation. If they miss the bus and they don't have transportation, they can't come to school. If mom is sick or there's somebody else who is for an older kid. If the mom's sick, the kid's sick, they may have to stay home and take care of the child. Like there's all kinds of different stuff that goes on so the onus of responsibility is not responsibility, but usually the onus of the problem has something to do with the family situation for the little kids. For the older kids, it could be that as well as on the older kid. Like,
I don't want to go.
Yeah, mom, I went to school today. Yeah, that's a different kind of situation. Sure. And so for the older kids, it's more about engagement and them wanting to be there. They're engaged, they're happy with their learning. Usually for the younger kids, there's some sort of either medical or family situation or home life situation. And so it's really complicated for schools to figure this out because it's not just, let's just pass a law and say, parents are in trouble if your kid doesn't come to school. It's like, well, most parents are trying to get them there. Like, that's not the issue.
And there's also an interesting dynamic among parents who are perhaps more affluent where absences are not created equal, right? Yeah. So if you come from a home where you're highly resourced, maybe that absence was a trip to a museum, right? And it wasn't you sitting at home watching TV. Those are very different scenarios, and we don't always capture what that looks like on the back end. But I do think obviously all kids should be in school to the extent possible. But we talk about a lot. What does it mean if my kid is absent because we were on vacation somewhere? still learning, still, extending their education, as opposed to the kid who couldn't get to school because they tore up the sidewalk the night before, some construction crew, and there's no safe path to school, and now they're home alone, and that's one day of learning they just don't get back.
That is an issue, especially in the more affluent neighborhoods and the younger kids.
Right.
Is parents like, oh, well, but Disney is cheaper the week after spring break and it's not as crowded. So we're going to go then. But if you've got a third of your class saying that, even if that kid is like, that still holds the whole class back. It's like, no, it actually, they need to be there for multiple reasons. And so part of it is just messaging the importance of showing up.
To all families.
And like, no, this, and I've heard it among my cohort of peers, like, oh, it's kindergarten. What are they going to miss?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, if they're not there, they're not going to be reading on grade level, or it's going to impact that. So part of it's education of just the importance of it, and then really figuring out within the community, like, how do we support the schools and what they need, and actually support them with resources? Because where we've seen impact of schools being able to address this, it's very labor intensive. This is probably like what you do. Like, they go to the house, they talk to the family, like, what do you need? Oh, I need a bus transportation. Oh, I need a mental health service, whatever. And they're responsible for coordinating all of that. And so are you given resources to do
it's not
all of
us.
that?
We have like a, what is her position? It's not a school. It's like a school counselor meets a community outreach person. So that's kind of what she does. She reached out to the families that she noticed need resources. And that was fine when it wasn't the norm. It's becoming the norm.
Right.
So it's like, I can't do this for 25 families.
Her caseload must be.
Yeah, it's like, I can't.
Yeah.
So even with that, she has a hard time because she's dealing with the parents, even pulling the kids to work with them, because she's dealing with the parents and what they need. So, gas cards are not cheap, or finding them housing. And like I said, it was fine when it was a one-off, but now it's the norm. So I feel sorry for her, because I'm like, I don't know how you find time to deal with the kids when you have to deal with the adults.
Big picture, how many students are we talking about in terms of attendance who are in poverty, who are chronically absent? Like, is it overwhelming? Is it?
Well, there's also another aspect to that too, because lateness parallels into absence as well. If you're late 20 times in 2 weeks, that starts turning into absence after like 3. And I have kids that literally show up at 9 o'clock. They're supposed to be to school by 8:15 at the latest, 7:45. They get to class at like 9:30. We're already in guided reading. You already missed a whole section of it. And it's an everyday thing. So it continues to put them farther and farther back because you're late every day.
Is there a correlation?
There is a correlation, and I don't have it off the top of my head, that you do see higher percentages of chronically absent children, and schools that have overall higher percentages of chronically absent kids that are in lower income communities. But this is a problem that, I mean, it's everywhere. It's not just the lower end, but you do see a higher proportion of students in low income
for a lot of reasons you pointed out, Ricardo. Just housing instability.
I mean, a lot of that is just logistics.
It's sad because there's nothing they can do about it.
No.
Yeah.
But it goes to the bigger picture. When we look at kids being 2 and 3 grade levels behind, you're absent a lot and you're late every day and you're missing the same thing. Like, you're missing guided reading every morning. Yeah. Which is huge because we're in groups. So you probably missed your group, which you need to be in. If you're doing that every day and we get to the end of the semester, the school year, baby, you behind. Yeah. Like, you were already in like tier 2. You're literally behind now, and either going to get retained or they're going to move you, and now you're lost. Yeah. You're in 3rd grade just looking around.
So we had an event yesterday
I was thinking about that, and I forgot the math.
Yeah, we had an event yesterday on family literacy, and so it's a 2-generation approach where you're educating the kids and the families, and we had some side conversations, and people were sharing with us that there are functioning adults who don't read on a 3rd grade level, which blows my mind. But you can see how if you're that kid that gets promoted every year, you end up getting through high school. Maybe you don't go to college, but you're in the world, you're working, and then you have your own children. You're not able to, it's a cycle.
Yeah, because you can't help them at home because you don't know how to do it. So I've run into that a couple times. It's like, after talking to the parent, you're like, you can't help at home either.
They keep saying that the strongest predictor of 3rd grade reading, it's not income. It is mother's education level, which is obviously highly correlated to income, but it's the mom's education level is the strongest absolute predictor if a child can read by 3rd grade on grade level.
Because moms are most often present.
I mean, all of the tropes, the child's first teacher, they're, the one most, set the tone in the home, and and their ability to navigate all of this and whatnot. And, a lot of times if you're dealing with, especially a young mom, like a teenage mom or any kind of mom that maybe just made it out of high school, my guess is their experience with school was not great. Sure. At best it was probably neutral. Like, yeah, I went, but they probably didn't feel endeared and really loved it. And so thinking about their experience, having go to a place that they weren't psyched about anyway to advocate for their child, like even their ability to do, I mean, all of this just kind of compounds. And so really thinking about community literacy levels and family literacy is a big key here.
That's some really interesting stuff in this report as well about literacy. We talk about literacy a lot, and because of the work that I do with folks who are usually immediately released, I definitely know adult illiteracy is very common in plenty of functioning people and working people who don't have a strong, mastery of literacy and numeracy, and are often parents. I think 50% of the prison population are parents.
Most of the way it's viewed. If I don't view education as important, it's not a priority. So that's kind of what we look at now.
Well, why would you view it as important? Well, I guess where do the values come from? I also just think before you can form your values, you may have already passed third grade. I mean, most people don't have strong values before third grade. Yeah.
Well, no, it's one of the family as far as the kids go. If my priority
for the parent
is trying to survive, then I'm not really worried about my kids' education. Unfortunately, that's...
And you haven't seen education as the golden ticket to make your life... Like, that's not been demonstrated for you. So why would you... I mean, it makes sense. Like, why would you... I mean, it's interesting you mentioned the prison population. Back to the critical issue forum that we had yesterday, which you guys will be able to watch online at gpee.org.
Thank you for that.
It really talked about... we talk about family literacy, but really multi-generational community approaches to literacy. And a lot of the research shows, which is interesting, getting ready to talk about literacy, focusing just on third grade reading, like what we're doing in the schools. If you do everything absolutely right and fully, it will only get you so far. It's not going to solve our third grade reading challenge. You have to look at the whole community and multi-generational approach, and that there are pockets in Georgia that are doing a lot of this. And one of them, the prison system, is really looking at multi-generational reading and figuring out how to, and working within prisons with the prison population of their own reading skill level, but also how do you read with your kid? How do you talk about literacy? How do you, and really thinking about it as a sort of a broader definition of literacy. What does it mean to be literate? Like in a literate family, in a literate community. And it goes to financial literacy, data literacy, but also just regular and AI literacy, and really thinking differently about what it means to be literate, and how different state agencies and especially community partnerships are working together to create the opportunities for families and communities to really look at literacy different. And it was a really interesting conversation.
Are we in a good spot with just literacy in its most basic form in terms of just phonics and people understanding?
We're getting there.
Okay.
Yes. And one of the big things that's coming out of the Georgia legislature is yet another, sorry, Ricardo, literacy bill.
I quit.
Coming your way.
I quit. Coming soon.
So as you know, 2 years ago, there was the big Georgia Literacy Act that was to move everybody, K-12, into the science of reading, which is this focus on phonemic awareness and all this other kind of stuff. And so we're all going to get trained. We're going to have new curriculum, blah, blah, blah. It was passed, it wasn't funded, so school districts had to self-fund this big transition. Some districts have transitioned beautifully, some are still struggling, but there is a general acceptance of this sort of science of reading and what we need to at least do to get everybody trained and whatnot. And as with anything else that's unfunded, depends on the capacity of the local school system, of how well it's going.
Okay.
But to help support that, there's a new bill that I'm certain is going to pass. It's in Senate right now, House Bill 1193, known as the Georgia Early Literacy Act of 2026. So it's not confused with the last one. But what it does, there's a couple of key things that are great, but also could create problems. It really does call for a state-funded literacy coach in every K-3 elementary school in the state.
Okay.
Which on its surface sounds great because literacy coaches, that is needed to really help implement and support all of this. Okay. They're debating on how much funding they're going to give schools or districts to do this, but they promise it will. My question is, I mean, they're looking at about 1,300 literacy coaches. Ricardo, do you know 1,300 currently unemployed, fully qualified literacy coaches looking for a job?
Look, I don't know what their credentials are, but there's a lot of unemployed people in this market.
Yeah, but that specific role.
I mean,
and so really,
can you read?
Yeah,
should be the only qualification.
But really, thinking about, you were talking earlier about with good policies with so-so implementation, how can we make sure this is done in a way that we don't actually pull some of our greatest teachers out of the classroom into this, creating another teacher problem? How do we balance that? So that's it also implements some new mandatory reading assessments for students entering the first grade.
Oh, God. Another test we have to
mandatory
get.
assessments? You don't like mandatory assessments?
Another test we have to get.
It creates a Georgia Director of Literacy, establishes a centralized director within the Office of Student Achievement known as GOSA to coordinate all of these statewide efforts. However, another bill that just passed yesterday and is awaiting the governor's signature having to do with the career stuff actually just dissolved GOSA and turned it into another office. So hold on that. But it also provides support for regional literacy coaches, so especially in our rural areas that aren't going to be able to hire. By support there, and requires local school systems to develop a unified literacy plan that includes measurable goals and strategies for connecting with early childhood providers to ensure school readiness before the age of 5. But they are currently debating in the current budget. They haven't passed the FY27 budget yet. They're debating about that. The House, in its version of the budget, has put in $31 million specifically for the literacy coaches and $60 million for just broader literacy initiatives. So we're starting to see some actual funding coming toward this. That's being debated in the Senate right now, where they're kind of scrutinizing that $60 million. They're like, I don't know, but they have committed to funding a.
Are we not in the surplus?
Is that a trick question?
What are we debating spending money for?
We have
because
a significant
education.
so far, the Senate has committed to a down payment for these coaches, and so we'll see how that goes in committee and working that out. But so more changes on literacy, with the intent of supporting the implementation of all this literacy work. We'll see how it goes. So you might want to get ready to pivot.
Dana, you're supposed to excite me after this conversation. Now
I love the ideas,
great.
right? It sounds good of literacy coaches,
it always
right?
sounds good.
It does.
It always sounds good.
Well, it does sound good, and it actually is a great idea.
It's funded.
And it looks like there'll be funding for it. But we have to have. So what's missing is this conversation of where are these literacy coaches coming from?
Right.
What are the post-secondary institutions doing to crank out more literacy coaches? What kind of, how are we not robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? Taking good teachers out of the classroom, because this is probably, think about the balance in the workforce. And so this is where it gets complicated.
There's still not enough people interested in the profession to where, okay.
Well, yeah, because those literary coaches are probably going to be the most seasoned teachers.
Yeah.
Because that's
are
probably
these
where their
full-time
passion
roles?
lies.
Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
That's where their passion lies.
Yeah.
It's
So they're going to run out of the classroom. I can tell you that. They're going to run out of the classroom because half of them are waiting for this kind of opportunity.
Yeah.
So they're going to run out of the classroom. So it's like, who are you going to put down there now?
That's
who you going to put there now.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the people I work with. Half of them are just like, as soon as I can find a way to get out of this classroom, I'm out.
So I do have good news for you guys. Something to be very excited about. Not for you, but you're fine.
you're a little too close to it.
Yeah, for those of our fellow people that want to go to college. We've been yelling for years that Georgia is one of only 2 states that does not have a statewide needs-based aid scholarship. We have the HOPE grant, which for TCSG, and we have the HOPE scholarship, which is merit-based. The governor announced in his State of the State, and it has been funded now through the amended budget, the DREAM Scholarship, which is a statewide needs-based aid program for students entering USG, TCSG. And they have earmarked from the reserves $325 million that they're putting into an endowment, and they're going to take the first $25 million of that and make it available this coming fall, 2026 school year, for students entering a USG system to get scholarship aid. And
That's
so
great.
that is we're really excited about. We're finally
That does
catching
nothing
up
for me,
to
Yeah.
Mississippi and Alabama.
It's gonna help a
But
lot of
Is
students.
it the
Yeah.
partnerships perspective that college is still critical, that we need to still be pushing folks toward college, that college education is valuable?
Well,
it depends on how you define college.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
we absolutely to be a part of the economy and the growth economy and everything else. You absolutely will need something beyond high school. You will need at least and so what we think about is college is more just sort of post-secondary credentialing. It could be a 4-year degree, but it could be an associate's degree. It could be stackable credentials, as long as those things are aligned with the growth jobs in Georgia. And so thinking about where are the growth jobs, where's the ROI.
Gotcha.
One of the things we're particularly excited about is the legislation that just undid GOSA creates, and this is aligned with I got the notes here because it's too much for my brain. House Bill 1302. It creates the Office of Education and Workforce Strategy, which is currently the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. And it's really designed to connect education policy and workforce economic development policy. And so to really and to strengthen apprenticeship programs through the technical college system of Georgia, it makes permanent what was a pilot program of dual enrollment students and access to the Hope Grant. They've removed the ceiling on, you can continue to get access to the Hope Grant even in high school as a dual enrollment student. It will provide us a lot more data. They're proposing a Education Data Governance Board with the specific intent of really looking at being able to track a student anonymously from high school into their career pathway and into the workforce. So we can measure the ROI of particular career pathways, and are they connecting to jobs that actually lead to a career and not just a job to get a job or a certificate to say you have one, but it's worthless, right? So how do we evaluate that? And so I think there's going to be some movement on really aligning career pathways, these types of degrees, diplomas, credentials that actually align well with growth industries in Georgia. It's a real concerted effort to help education understand what do those need to be, what are the skill pathways and things like that. So we're hopeful about that. I have concerns about what's going to happen to the stuff that Governor's Office of Student Achievement is doing, like the statewide literacy plan and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, it may stay there. I don't know. So let's just keep an eye on that. And both of those were big. The literacy work and this were a big key thing of Governor Kemp. And he's been working for most of his 2 terms around this workforce education alignment, which is great. And so setting up this office to really solidify that. But he's not going to be governor after January. So it'd be really interesting to see what the new governor does with this. Is it still priorities? Is it still how do they staff it? How do they fund it? All of that kind of stuff. So we're back to the elections and the opportunity to build what we want in Georgia.
All right, I keep saying we really have to do this. We really have to start making this 2 hours because we can't get to. No, I mean it's
there's
up.
too much to get into.
And now I actually have insight because I'm actually in it, so it actually works.
Yeah.
All right, final thoughts, 30 seconds. Go.
Oh man.
You know this is coming.
No. Thank you for the opportunity to actually think about 30 seconds of what I want to say, 10 of which I've already used.
How about you just use half of it?
No, I think 2026 is a pivotal year for Georgia. Yeah. As Dana noted, with all the leadership turnover, there's concern about what that might look like, but there's also a lot of opportunity. Our main focus this year, in addition to what we've already outlined, is to get in front of the people who are going to be making key decisions, and really get them to think about what level of influence they can have on education, workforce, and persuade them that we have a plan that is well thought out, well designed, and can be good for Georgia, not just for today, but for tomorrow.
That was well done.
I know.
That's why he keeps getting promoted.
I know. I'm just like,
work. And I would say to that ditto, and that it's our job to really try and communicate this stuff outside of the education ecosystem. Yeah. We've been looking at different polling across the state, and usually when they poll potential voters or likely voters, and what are your top 3 issues? Typically, in years past, education has always been up there, maybe second or third. This year, education is nowhere. It's like 9 or 10. And like the top 3 issues are affordability, healthcare, housing. And so what we're trying to do is really educate the populace of that actually education policy. If that's done right, those top 3 issues kind of go away, right? Like if we've got the education system down, that helps the economy, that helps access to everything, and that we're sort of all in this together. And so really trying to change the conversation around how people view public education, that it is whether you think it's working or not, it's an investment worth investing in because it gets at all these other things. And then, with the population understanding that helps with the candidates and everything else, but really trying to change the conversation around why this is so important that we keep investing in public education, but invest in a way that is correct, like things that work and things that actually are helpful, and have these conversations that move us forward.
Yeah, I'll say the same. Like talking about investment, that's my closing thought is how much we invest and like how strategic we are with investments really does matter. So because it's an election year and because there's lots of different people who are coming into office, including a potential new governor, we can change our investment formula and the QBE, which I can't even break that down the acronym, but I know that we don't weight poverty as heavily as we should, and we have a surplus. Correct. We could definitely be giving a lot more money to students who are in need and be using household income as an indicator of where we should put our money. Yep. So that's a simple legislative fix. It doesn't require a constitutional amendment. It doesn't require
many other southern states.
Yeah, it's smart. That should be a question for every gubernatorial candidate, from Keisha to the gentleman. Oh, the gentleman. Duncan, yeah. Yes. It should be everyone's answer. Like, will you address QBE?
Man.
All right. Well, special thanks to family, Robert.
Ricardo,
I know you hated it, but you did fine as always.
Hey, man.
And Madam President Dana, thank you guys for coming. You're not Batman.
He's the puppet master.
Not Batman. And we will see you guys same time, same place on another episode of the Leadership Been Live podcast with your host, Ricardo Rice, and co-host
Simone Shuri.